stepping back and getting that clarity of intention of around if you're going to have some sort of transition or transformation, what do you want that to look like? How do you want things to be different? And what's the area of growth? So considering what I want to learn. So all these are just a number of examples, but trying to get clarity. And will you necessarily find a role and opportunity that's going to align with all those things perfectly? The personal brand takes all those things around, like what are your genius zones and your intentions and all that. And then it turns in, how do you then communicate that and showcase the value to people that care? So we want to look inside for ourselves, but sometimes we get stuck on our own heads, and that's a difficult place to be. And so it's really nice to have those trusted friends, leaders, mentors, coaches, those people in our lives that sometimes can see things.
Welcome, Team ET. Today we've got an assortment of core skills that we're going to be touching on, but with a common purpose, and that is our aim to assist all of us to be better leaders, regardless of industry or present level. Let's try some of these leadership characteristics and skill sets on for size, just to get us started. Intentionality, networking, emotional intelligence, giving back, personal branding, risk-taking, career planning, resilience, adaptability. Sounds like we've got many of the ingredients for a great conversation, and I'm quietly confident that's what we're going to have. And we'll unpack much of this under the guise of our guest's book that he released back in October last year called The Intentional Engineer. So I'm keen to jump into the conversation. Firstly, welcome, Jeff. Wonderful to have you visit us back on the ET project.
Yeah, thanks for being with me, and so excited to jump in here, Wayne. And you really blew it open with all those different topics we can dive into. We can go deep into any one of those, but we'll see where the conversation flows.
For sure. I'm sure it's going to be an interesting one. It's been a while since we connected last. It's almost 2 years if I look back. And it was on your podcast, which is the Engineering Career Coach. You're still running and hosting that podcast?
Yeah, so we've taken a little break here in the summer in terms of doing new episodes, and we're going to revitalize it with a new focus. But yeah, I've been running episodes, typically comes out twice a month, and we've got hundreds of episodes out there on the Engineering Career Coach. That's in coordination and partnership with the Engineering Management Institute that I love working with. And so, yeah, I still get to be the primary host there, and been up to all sorts of different things. So it was great to reconnect here. Yeah, it has been about 2 years.
Yes, it's a great podcast if people haven't tuned in, the Engineering Career Coach. So I'd recommend. I noticed that you've also been working on your branding since we spoke last time. What have you been doing? What's going on?
Yeah, so for a lot of us who are out here in some sort of service-based business where we're providing services to others, there are a number of different ways to go about it. But my approach over the last year and a half, instead of when I started the business, I started with a brand name. I wanted to connect to the engineering industry. I work with engineering and technology professionals, and I called it More Than Engineering for a long time, trying to expand, like, hey, we're engineers, but we're more than that. You know, we're leaders, we're people at home in our communities and different things, and to expand, you know, the ways that we can identify with our identity beyond just that of what a professional life is, right? And so that was kind of the idea behind that. But as I've been leaning into things in a different way, and was thinking about writing a book and then creating that, I wanted to lean in more into my personal brand of who Jeff Perry is and what Jeff Perry stands for, because my messaging around what I'm standing for as time goes on might continue to shift and change. But it's still always going to be me, right? So for a long time, I've been focusing on engineers. I still do that for the most part now, and engineering and technology leaders, but that could be different in the future. But Jeff Perry will always be the same person, right? So I've just kind of rebranded over to just Jeff Perry, jeff-perry.com, and you know, all my main stuff's there, and then I can continue to change my messaging as time goes on.
Right.
because there'll be more books and different initiatives that I do as time goes on, as my interests and things change, and we run
Yeah.
experiments and see what's working, and also where kind of the energy and the passion flows. And that's just allows me to be able to pivot in a different way. And I think we
Mhm.
all do that, right? As we move through our careers, we have different roles and opportunities and things we're considering. We all want to be able to pivot and say, hey, what's next for me? And how do we prepare ourselves to be able to do that?
Yeah, I look at my own career and look at where we are with our organization. People talk about having this clear blueprint at the beginning. I think it's a fallacy. I don't think it
Yeah,
exists, and I think we evolve into what we end up becoming. And I guess that's where you're going as well with a lot of the stuff you're talking about.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
so, like the whole concept of like career development that I spent a lot of time in, and a lot of the book, The Intentional Engineer, is based on the concept of intentionality. Yes, it's like, hey, we want to have a direction of where we're trying to go and who we're trying to become. Like you
Mm,
say, having this like perfect blueprint where X marks the spot, I know exactly where I'm going to be in 5 years. Like that is a fallacy.
yeah.
So also embracing some of the concepts from engineering and product design, as I know you've been involved in as well, where hey, things are iterative, right?
Yeah.
And we need to
Yeah.
come up with like what's the basic version of this, and how
Yeah.
can I run experiments and try new things, thinking of our different career stages as kind of prototypes, and
Right.
saying, what can I learn from this? I'm a continually evolving person, and my
Yeah.
career is continually evolving. Yes, I want to be intentional about the direction I'm headed, but
Mm.
also being flexible with how we go about doing that and being able to deal with that. It feels like there's tension and feels like a dichotomy, but it actually isn't. It's kind of a yes and deal.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really interesting, and a lot of people, I'm sure, are nodding as they're listening. Let's step back a little bit further and
Yep.
just understand the journey that you've been on. I mean, you started in engineering,
Yep.
I think in software engineering, if I'm correct, and now you've moved more into leadership and career coaching. What was that transition, or the reason for that transition?
Yeah, so the real brief story, I actually got a degree in mechanical engineering, but right after I graduated, I was in software. And so I was writing code, recognized that code and being behind a computer writing code all day was not for me. So then I actually went to a smaller company doing manufacturing and mechanical engineering, and got into a leadership role there and really loved that. But also in that space had opportunities to do, as we were going through a merger with another company, and we were rebranding, and we were kind of going through, I call it kind of a identity crisis as a company,
Right.
and we were revisiting core values, and we brought in some training opportunities that I got to actually do a lot
Mm.
of the culture training for the whole company over the course of a year or two. And that was kind of a side responsibility on the top of my engineering leadership responsibility.
Right.
But I recognized that I loved that. There was a huge mindset component to that
Mm.
work, that we do a standard training, but also would do a lot of custom work with the executive teams, and particular leaders or teams when they were having some challenges inside, that we'd partner with HR and do some of that work. And I just recognized that I looked forward to doing that work where we were working on building people way
Right.
more than I was working when I was working on building things, where I was working on building products or
Mm.
processes or other things. And so I just recognized it within myself. What I'm all about is building people. And so I started asking that question, like, how can I do more of that? How can I do more of that? And I got an MBA. And it was in the midst of that actually that I shifted and went all in on this, my new coaching and training
Yeah.
venture, and started that. And it's been a wild ride since then. So that was 2019 when I jumped from the corporate world, and been doing this ever since.
Yeah. Did I read correctly that you also have started an apparel business, the Engineer Swag?
Yeah, so just kind of a side deal that I do now, but just kind of fun, where I have some engineering related swag that's available print on demand. So yeah, engineerswag.com, just fun, kind of t-shirts and stuff for engineers. So just kind of a fun deal, because I was doing a lot of work with engineers and
Right.
people thought some of that stuff was fun. So I did stuff
Oh,
with some
nice.
like that.
Well, let's dive into some of the topics. And I'm intentionally, I know we talk about
Yeah.
intentional, but I'm
Yeah.
intentionally starting with quite a broad question, right? So what are some of the common challenges that, engineers in general, because you focus on engineers, but people in general, I guess, what are some of the common challenges that they face in their careers?
Yeah, a lot of different things, but I'll characterize a few of them. One is so many people, this is especially true for engineers, but it's true for people in all sorts of industries, that there are so many things that they could do, that they're multifaceted. They have many different skills and aptitudes and experiences that could be applied in many different areas, different types of roles, different types of companies or industries.
Mm,
And that's fantastic that they can be so versatile. But for many, that also provides a sense of analysis paralysis. Like, there's so many things I could do,
yeah.
that actually making a decision and choosing a direction and moving forward even one step at a time is quite an anxious endeavor for a lot of people.
Mm,
So getting clarity around like what's important to me, what that intention is very difficult for a lot of people. And a lot of times they want someone else to tell them what to do, whether that's a boss or a coworker or even a coach or something like that,
yeah.
to try and, you know, remove themselves from that responsibility of whatever happens, but really needing to own that responsibility and recognize that we need to move forward and get some clarity of what that intention is, of what we care about and who we're trying to become. So that's a
Yeah.
difficult process for almost all of us to work through. Other
I,
challenges that
sorry.
well, any thoughts on that, Wayne?
No. I was just going to say to that point. I have a lot of clients who have the opposite problem. They have the FOMO scenario where the next
Yeah.
shiny object is always out there, and they're ready to seize that as the next thing they should be focused on, rather than focus on that one thing. They're looking at so many things they just can't really get their direction set. So I guess
Yeah,
you.
well, and that is a different shade of the same issue,
Mm,
right? Where there are so many, and it's similar, where there are so many things that they could do. There's so many shiny objects out there, but
yep,
making a decision, and whether that's just one thing or just saying, hey, I can't do it all the time. So at least just like,
yep,
cooling the jets and focusing that a little bit so that
yep,
we can be present in different things. And this
yep,
is true in terms of the alignment that we want to make, not just in our career and our leadership responsibilities and the roles we want to take on there at work, but also how is that aligned with our personal lives and the things we care about as well. Like for me, I've got a young family. We were talking about before we started recording.
mm,
I've got 4 young kids, and so like my family is a huge influence on how I go about organizing my work and thinking about the way I want to do that, and the flexibility that I care about. That would be different of me in a different state or someone else and just their particular priorities,
right,
right? And in how they think about aligning work with the personal life in terms of where you want to live, the type of place, and the amount of money that you need to be able to provide a particular type of lifestyle, and whatever that
mm,
is, right? Are those things aligned with things? And that alignment word is an interesting way to think about. We talk a lot about work-life balance these days, and how do we balance our work responsibilities and life responsibilities. I prefer thinking about in how can we be as aligned as possible so that
mm,
our work life aligns with the life that we're trying to live, and our life can support us doing great work,
yep,
whatever we're doing, right? So trying to find ways to do some of those things. And then uh, another thing is like, we're the foundation of a lot of the changes that we're trying to make
right,
It really comes down to the way that we approach the whole situation. So often when we are trying to make some sort of change in our life or career or whatever that is, we start prescribing what are the things I need to do differently, right? So these are all the actions I need to take. And that's fine. Like, we need to look at the behavior change,
Mm.
but foundationally, to make a change sustainable, to operate at a different level, if we're trying to level up and we need to gain a new set of skills and competencies and be able to deal with a higher level of complexity, like a lot of the leaders that you and I are working with, then there's things about the way that we approach those problems and the way we approach our teams and the way we approach leadership that fundamentally needs to change in how we think differently. So I do a lot of work, and a lot of people don't think about this up front, but they recognize after we do the work that this was extremely important, as some of the mindset work that we do,
Right.
to change not just what we do, but how we approach it all and think differently about the problems and the opportunities that we face,
Mm.
so that that actually influences the actions that we take and how we show up with people in our lives, and can seize those opportunities and mitigate some of the challenges that we face.
So in your book, The Intentional Engineer, you talk about living intentionally. And I guess this is, if I was to put a branding around what you just said, this is part of that living intentionally.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. Right.
So intentionality and living intentionally is figuring out like what I most want, what I'm trying to become,
Mm.
right? Moving and living in that space, getting that alignment, that clarity with what I care about, and changing those things internally, that mindset,
Right.
to be able to support that change as we continue to move forward.
You have a lot of interesting expressions or phrases that you use in the book. One of them is genius zones.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
could you explain that concept?
Yeah. So I learned the concept of genius zones a few places. One of the places that I think is a great book that describes it is called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. Um, but genius zone's a little different from where there is an emphasis, if people are familiar with, like, strengths, like the Gallup
Yep.
organization
Yep.
has Strengths Finder and stuff like that. And different things like that. And strengths are fantastic, and I love them. But genius zone, we'd put in a few different categories. There's a zone of like incompetence, like, hey, I'm not good at this. There's a zone of
Mhm.
competence where, like, there, for a lot of us, there are a lot of things that we do fine, like we can accomplish, we can do well, we're competent at it. And then zone 3 we'll call a zone of excellence, like things that we are really pretty good at, right? But optimally, we would love to spend as much time as possible in this zone 4 we call the genius zone. Or
Mm.
um, and there's a couple different ways to look at approaching a genius zone. I mean, using just that word zone, like we think about like people who are in the zone, maybe mostly we think about like professional athletes, like they get
Right.
in this zone where, like, hey, a basketball player, that the basketball hoop just looks bigger, like everything seems to go in. Or a
Yep.
football player, that they can just make any play that they need to make, and they just have this eye or this connection to the ball or whatever. Or a swimmer who is just dialed into their stroke, and everything is running fluid and everything, right? They're in the zone. Well, no matter what our work context is, like, we have opportunities and times that we're in that. And another word that is used from the research is the concept of flow, which came
Mm.
from research from Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
Yep.
If I'm pronouncing that right. He passed away a couple years ago or so.
Yeah.
But just that state of like, there's a challenge that we have to rise to, but our skills and our abilities have the ability to meet that challenge, and it's just hard enough that we're not diminished by it, but that we love to rise to it.
Mm.
And you almost lose track of time when you're in flow, and it's a
Yeah.
high state of contribution and of joy and satisfaction, right? So it's a fabulous place to be for us to enjoy our work, and for the value that we deliver for our employers, or if we are self-employed or run a business, than, for the customers and clients and people that we deliver value to, right? If we can operate in that genius zone as much as possible.
I know I'd certainly like to trigger that state of flow or operate in that genius zone much more often than I probably do.
Yeah.
Do you offer your clients any tips on how to get there?
Yeah, so a few different things. I mean, you consider to step back, like, hey, what are those activities, those environments, those situations, work or non-work related, where you found yourself in a state of flow? Some people, it's hobbies. I talked to a few people like, hey, when they're exercising or when they're on a motorcycle and they just feel connected to the road, they, or like for me, sometimes when I'm facilitating conversations in a room or with a group of people in person or digitally, sometimes like I
Right.
can get in that state of flow where I can feel the energy and I can manage and change things and invite conversations. And that's a fun state for me to be in. And I get energized by that and have just a ton of fun facilitating conversations that need to be had and raising the energy in those situations. So it can happen in all sorts of different situations, right? So just step back and say, hey, when have I been in that state? What has been the activity? The environment is important around that, and the other elements that helped create that opportunity and that time, right?
Yeah.
Another way to look at it is thinking about putting different of those strengths that you might have or things in unique combinations that might bring out some unique approaches that you take, right? So I think about three particular categories you can think about. One is like, do you have natural gifts? We're all born a little bit different, right? With natural tendencies and skills and things like that. So looking at your natural gifts, those things that you gravitated toward even when you were a little kid. And continue to emerge sometimes. Second is experiences that we had, sometimes great experiences, sometimes real challenges that we face in our lives, and how because of those,
Right.
we approach things differently, right? Whether that's physical or mental or family challenges, whatever, right? That we faced. And then third is learned skills. So just because of what you've learned over the course of time through education or through work experience or other things, you've learned all sorts of different skills. And then you can take those three categories, make big lists, and then consider try and combine those in unique ways into like a Venn diagram, like a three-part Venn diagram, and look at that intersection. Does that intersection of those things make me uniquely qualified to do particular things that maybe most people in the world don't? And that is a genius zone for you, potentially, that you might want to explore more. So, I mean, for you, Wayne, where you've got so many different, leadership experience in different sorts of industries and companies, and the ways that you approach building people and leadership and coaching and everything, you have a unique approach that allows you to deliver the type of work and the value that you do now. And the international experiences and things that you've had and everything. And so some of those combinations are part of what allow you to do the great work that you're doing now.
Yeah, thank you. We, when I was in the corporate role a couple of years back, we did a number of interventions. And one of them was using the 8 random times during the day, setting an alarm on the phone and recording our state when that alarm went off. And what we found was over a period of a month or so, as we reflected back, and we recorded this, of course, as we reflected back on what we were doing and we identified the times of day and the activities we were involved in, where we were most in flow, we were able to find collectively as a group, so double loop learning, if you like, collectively the best time of day for us to be doing meetings, the best time of day for us to do proactive activities, etc. Just out of identifying this. I like what you're talking about. I think it's a very powerful tool. And if people learn how to harness this, they can really maximize. We used it primarily for habit creation and routine building, but you can do so much with it, as you're explaining. So I think that's a great
And we could go
story.
down deeper rabbit holes and other approaches to some of that stuff, but we'd be here all day with some of that stuff.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Let's jump across to career planning. You mentioned already about alignment and looking for alignment between work life and finding that balance, but preferably looking at how you align those two. When you think about career, and I know you talk about this a lot with what you do, is there any suggestions you have for your clients to help them navigate their career more smoothly? Make that transition. Most of us are going to change roles as leaders at least multiple times throughout our career, and this transition phase is critical. Is there anything you talk about with your clients in this regard?
Yeah, so stepping back and getting that clarity of intention around, if you're going to have some sort of transition or transformation, what do you want that to look like? How do you want things to be different? And what's the area of growth? Because there is kind of a times and seasons, and over the course of a year, but also I think about times and seasons of life and where priorities want to be or need to be, and where we want to prioritize certain times and energy and focus as things continue to change. And so stepping back and kind of looking at that big picture and being introspective of some of those things, so that it helps you make determinations around the types of opportunities that you're considering, where, if you're making a career transition, you consider like, hey, what's the work experience going to look like? Do I care right now about being in person? Because that's really care about hybrid, remote work. That's just one of many factors. Location, do I need to be there? Am I going to travel a lot or a little? Do I love the travel? Do I not want to be a road warrior? What does that look like? What's the level of responsibility and the stress I'm going to take? The level of hours and the expectations around that. Is there a particular industry or a skill that I want to learn, right? Or a type of challenge that I want to face, where maybe I've been focused on maintaining existing programs, and I really want to have an opportunity as I make a transition to start something brand new, whether that's in the midst of a startup or a larger company that's doing a new initiative or something. And I want to have that sort of experience to round out my skill set and things. So considering what I want to learn. So all these are just a number of examples, but trying to get clarity. And will you necessarily find a role and opportunity that's going to align with all those things perfectly? No, probably not. It's hard to check every single box of the ideal, but the more you can consider the different factors, and where some of those might be, hey, these are non-negotiables, right? That like have to be met if I'm going to make a transition. And then you have another set of things that like, hey, these are nice to have, and I'd like to meet as many of those as possible. Right? It just helps narrow the scope and the focus of where you're putting energy. And do you need to skill up for something to make a transition like that? And that can help you consider if there's training or educational things that you might need to dig into, or just mentoring you might need to seek out. It helps you focus and narrow, like, who are the types of people I need to be talking to explore this new realm that I'm unfamiliar with, but I want to consider, right? And have some conversations there. So it really helps dial in the actions that you take as you get that clarity.
So you would start on, if I heard correctly, you start with their career aspirations or their goals and get the clarity on what it is they want to do, and then you look at some action steps to help them align that career with those personal aspirations. Do you also work with them on values, their core values, as part of that transition?
Absolutely, and I have an exercise to uncover some of those inside the book. So Yeah, I
Mm,
mean that's part of that alignment as well. Anything about your values and your own personal purpose. Does a company and the types of products or services you're going to do, does that align with your own values, your own purpose,
right.
right? Because
Yep.
just to use one example that's really easy, I have, some clients in the engineering industry that they really align with, and love working on things like in the defense industry, right?
Hmm.
And they align with, and they find great value in creating things that protect others in that way, right? And others look at an industry like that and they say, hey, I don't want to make missiles that are going to blow things or people up. That's not how I want to do. Now, it's the same thing, but it's different people and their own value systems and how they
Yes.
align or don't with that. That's an easy one to look at. But I could think about all sorts of products. Some people would love to
Mm,
work on social media programs. Other people see social media uh, companies as terrible and they don't want anything to do with them, right? And so everyone has their different value systems. Um, and that's part of for us to decide in terms of what our core values are and how we align with those things
yeah.
in different ways.
Yeah. I mean, we could talk a lot about the mind and how the mind and key elements of the mind values, of course, part of this whole process. Is there any mindset, if we use that word, that we should be thinking about or we should adopt
Yeah.
specific to career transition, career success? Like Carol Dweck talks about, growth mindsets as an example.
Yeah. Yeah. So Carol Dweck's growth mindset, fantastic. I reference it in my book. Hugely important, especially to think and a few applications. And real quick, if people are unfamiliar with the growth mindset, the opposite is what we call a fixed mindset. And all these mindsets, we're always on some sort of spectrum. We always have some of each in all of us, right? But a fixed mindset suggests that I believe that both me and the other people around me are relatively fixed. If there's something I'm good at, it's just something that I'm always going to be good at. If I'm bad at something, that's pretty much how it's always going to be. And I believe that same thing about others, right?
Mm,
A
mm,
growth mindset suggests that we believe that people can grow and change given effort and focus and
right.
energy, right?
Yeah.
So, just a personal example of mine, I used to have a very fixed mindset that I had natural proclivities towards math and science and the hard sciences, which kind of led me into engineering. I actively avoided anything that was creative or subjective, right? That didn't
Right.
have like a right answer. And so I hated writing, I hated art and all that sorts of stuff. I've shifted some of those things. I write a lot now. I wrote a book. And so I've had to grow in that growth mindset approach to saying, hey, I can be a writer instead of where previously I used to avoid that as much as possible, right? That's just
Yeah.
a personal example there. But we can also apply it in terms of like, hey, if something isn't going right, what can I learn from that? How can I grow? Is there something that maybe I've been neglecting to put in the effort that I need to
Mm,
there instead of saying, hey, this isn't working out. This is never going to work out. The
right.
growth mindset suggests that I can look for opportunities to change and learn from any experience, uh, whether it's a success or something we might deem a failure, we can grow through that
Mm.
experience. And so
And of
it
course,
frames that. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, of course, with technology and the rapid changes and accelerating technology advances we're seeing today, upskilling, reskilling are a couple of areas where the growth mindset's really, really important.
Oh, it's huge, right? As things
Yeah,
are changing rapidly, but also just on a more personal level, like,
yeah,
hey, if I get caught up in a layoff and now I'm out of a job.
yep,
And I get, because, for example, the tech industry is highly competitive after a number of layoffs and I get rejection after rejection after rejection.
yes,
Um, sometimes we can get really fixed and, say like, there's something wrong with me instead of saying,
mm,
okay, how can I learn and adapt and change my approach to give myself the best chance of success, but not so attaching to the outcome along the way. So that's
mm,
uh, some applications there. The other one that I talk a lot about comes from a consulting company called the Arbinger Institute. They've written a number of books, but it's called the outward mindset. And the opposite is called the inward mindset. But the outward mindset is most focused around how we orient towards other people. This is the most relationship-based of mindsets that I'm aware of. And put simply, when we have an inward mindset, we see people as objects.
Right.
We objectify them either as like objects that we need to use to accomplish our ends, or they're obstacles in our way, or we just see them as irrelevant. We just don't care about them because we're largely self-focused on what we care about, right? And that can obviously impact how we show up for people as leaders or team members or what have you. The outward mindset suggests that we see people as people that matter like we matter. They're not more important. We're not more important. We care about them. Does that mean we need to do everything that everyone else says? Absolutely not. But we consider that and take that into account in how we show up for people, and we consider them. So, a huge relation to emotional intelligence and things like that is that mindset.
I was just thinking while you were mentioning that, I can imagine people with that inward mindset aren't big on empathy, which is
not generally
a key factor in today's world, right? Yeah, but that's interesting. What was the name of the group again? I didn't quite catch that.
It's called the Arbinger Institute. So if you were to take the word harbinger and take the H off the front, that's how you'd spell it.
Okay, perfect. So, I mean, we're talking a lot about the individual. To that extent, what's the importance in career transitioning with your personal brand?
Well, the personal brand takes all those things around, like what are your genius zones and your intentions and all that, and then it turns in how do you then communicate that and showcase the value to people that care, whether that is you're looking for a new job or opportunity within your own company, or you are a business owner and you're communicating, the types of things that you do, whatever that is. You need to be able to take who you are and the value you deliver and communicate that to people who care and can see that value and obviously compensate you for that. And so that takes form in every form of communication, whether that's written form, if you're a content creator, or even just like what's on your LinkedIn profile or your resume, or those sorts of things, to the conversations you have. How do you introduce yourself? How do people see you? And so I think about the personal brand, if we were to think about a Venn diagram again, and think about one circle, just a 2-circle Venn diagram. One circle is who you are, and it's like broad picture of who you are, right? And the other circle is what people know about you. And your personal brand is the intersection of that. Like, what are you helping people know about you, right? And so if you're a strong personal brand, there's going to be more overlap, because it's your responsibility to share about who you are with the world and the people that care, right? And if they don't know, that's your fault, not theirs. I talk to a lot of people who are moving through career transitions, and they're like, oh, I see so many jobs that this would be perfect for me, right? I look at all the things on the job description, whatever, like I've done all these things, like this would be perfect. Yeah, but the way that you're presenting yourself, I have no idea that would be perfect for you if I was a hiring manager, recruiter or something. Right? Because you're doing nothing to tell me about those things, whether in your profile, your resume, or how you introduce yourself and reach out to me, right? So it's your responsibility to communicate those things so that I know, right? And does that mean it's going to work every time? No, but the more clearly we can share those things, obviously in a way that is relevant to the problems that other people are facing, the skills that they care about, the more likely we're going to be able to find that alignment across people and what we're trying to accomplish. That obviously that's another form of alignment. I want what I'm trying to do in my career to align with whatever my company or client is trying to accomplish as well.
And that's particularly important in today's world, where a lot of the technology and the platforms like LinkedIn, as an example, based on your profile and based on what you're showing to the world, they will quite often promote opportunities. And if that profile is not what you're actually doing or what you believe and what you want, then it's just a waste of time. The opportunities they present don't align, right? So there's real reason.
Yeah.
There's a couple of other points that I wanted to touch on before we move off the topic, but I'm curious about how much self-reflection, and then the other part is seeking feedback, play a role for individuals during this transitional phase. So self-reflection first, perhaps.
Yeah. So, I mean, to talk about both, I think it's a yes and situation. We do need both, right? So we want to look inside for ourselves, but sometimes we get stuck on our own heads, and that's a difficult place to be. And so it's really nice to have those trusted friends, leaders, mentors, coaches, those people in our lives that sometimes can see things or maybe just speak things that maybe when we hear it, we're like, oh yeah, that's true, that we might be blind to or just not be willing to believe until someone else acknowledges that as well. And so I love that that just opportunity to do some of that introspection and find ways to connect with ourselves, which is important, because we, like I said earlier, I think we can't expect that someone else will just provide the answers for us, right? We need to make the decisions for our own life, for our own career, and take responsibility for that, right? So the introspection and the decision making, and that still needs to come from us, but we can absolutely ask questions, get insights, get feedback from other people who know us, love us, trust us, and can share some things because they've worked with us, because they've lived with us, because they've interacted with us in some form or fashion, and they see things. And if we can ask questions and invite that feedback, invite that insights, and or ask questions because of their expertise and their experiences around things to see if that aligns with where we might want to go, all those conversations can be hugely insightful to help us then take that into our own introspection approach to go and make decisions.
Yeah. I think the whole premise around self-awareness under the guise of emotional intelligence is always step one for me. As I look at a lot of the clients, if they don't understand themselves, and they can deepen that understanding through these practices, reflection, seeking input, it helps to build that awareness, and from there they can then improve or change or do additional things. So I also agree that it's extremely important.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a big secret. You and I both work with leaders who lead other people, right? Like, but you have to be able to be aware of and lead yourself so that you can effectively lead others. Does that mean you need to be perfect? No. And so we're continuing to try and be vulnerable and continue to ask for feedback, even from those that we lead, right? And continue to improve that way. But yeah, I mean, we need to continue to grow that awareness of how we're showing up for people and how we can grow and change so that we can continue to intentionally grow and change and become who we want to become.
And off the back of that, I'm a big proponent of accountability partners. I'm not sure about yourself, but I think for all leaders, the need to have somebody else there that can help you stay focused, that can help call a spade when it's needed, or they can help, just be a sounding board for you. I think accountability partners is one of the areas that I highly recommend for any leader, but particularly as you're going through that career transition. You can't know everything and you can't see everything yourself, and having somebody else there that can sort of point something out that you may overlook or might be an oversight, super critical. I'm not sure how you feel about it.
Oh, I'm a huge proponent of accountability and accountability partners. And thinking about that in the work context and also the personal context,
Yeah.
just for I tell this story in my book, but I'll share it here real briefly. Uh, I'm someone who has a sweet tooth, and I sometimes get lazy about my physical exercise and some things, even though I love, getting out and being active. And so I have a friend who has done a lot of change in his fitness routine and different things. And so I utilize him as an
Mm,
accountability partner for my fitness goals. And
right.
so I do certain things. I have to do so many push-ups or workouts, and I avoid certain types of foods and certain days of the week and whatever. And it's a real simple thing, but every week we kind of renew an accountability contract. And if I
Right.
don't meet that, then I pay him like $10. It's not a huge amount of money, but it's just annoying enough that
Yep.
if I don't follow through, then I have to do that. And so, like, that means that I find myself at the end of the day, like, oh man, I got to do another set of push-ups. But then I get out of bed and I go do my set of push-ups because I realize I don't want to pay him $10. Or
Yeah.
I'm at an event and there's a bunch of desserts all around. Like, yeah, well, I could eat a bunch because that looks delicious. Or I can not pay him $10 to meet my accountability goal. And so it's a real simple thing, and you don't always have to be that formal,
Yep.
right? In that, but yeah, that's a huge thing that helps me do that. And I find different people in different aspects can be that
Mm,
accountability partner. Sometimes it's formal, sometimes it's informal for different things that I'm working on. Absolutely.
yeah. Yeah. If we stay with the career transitioning theme for a moment, and we look to the future, we've already touched on technology and the advances, but I'm wondering how you see it, coming out of that area and focusing heavily on engineering. How do you see the future in engineering and for the engineers as a profession, um, with the changes that are occurring? How do engineers stay current? How do they prepare for that future? I know that's a
Yeah.
broad question, a big
Yeah.
question. I apologize.
So no doubt, like, we need to stay up with the latest technologies that continue forward, and no matter, and that's going to be different for every particular industry that people are in and how things
Mm,
are changing. The thing that I find that most people, though, when we're talking about staying current in that space, we focus so much on the technical skills, and that's important. We need to be able to do that, right? The really practical things that need to be accomplished, and
yeah.
the skills to be able to accomplish the work. Um, but we sometimes do that to the detriment of missing out on how we need to develop people and their capacities,
Mm,
right? And I think about it, especially with the growth of AI and different things like that. Like, yeah, more and more things are going to be automated, and you need to learn how to use those tools
yeah.
for your benefit and for your company's benefit, and all those things. But more and more of the types of technological analysis and other things are being automated or streamlined with some of these technologies,
Mm,
where we used to all be knowledge workers, and more of that knowledge is that much more easily available, and so our specialized knowledge isn't as valuable as it used to be. So I think it's that much more important to lean into the things that AI, in my personal opinion, will never take away. And that's our ability to connect as humans, the human only types of skills, and how we
right.
relate with people and we solve problems together and collaborate, and those sorts of things, that everyone needs to lean into those things that are never going to be able to be automated with AI, because they're still humans making
Mm,
decisions and relating with each other, right?
right.
And I think that's something that isn't being talked about nearly enough, but something that I'm trying to build out as I have this focus on building people, not things,
Mm,
right? We want to build people, and then the people will build the things that need to be taken care of. But as leaders, especially, our responsibility is to build the people,
yep.
and they'll take care of the things instead of focusing so much on the thing that needs to be accomplished, the task, the project, the product that we're working on, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
let's
So true.
build the people.
So true. we've only scratched the surface of the book, and for those that are interested, The Intentional Engineer, you should read it. Very, very interesting read, insightful read. Jeff, are there any key takeaway points if we were to look at the book or to look at what you're doing with careers and with the people you're coaching? Any key takeaways they can leave here today with and put into action that's going to help them?
Yeah, thanks, Wayne, for asking that. Like I said, if people want to grab the book, theintentionalengineer.com, they can go find that or find it on Amazon. But so three main takeaways that we'll talk about. So that I feel like are foundational to we're focusing a lot on career transition. We'll just stay with that theme. So one is to seek to gain awareness of mindset and where your thinking patterns are right now. There are a number of mindset assessments that you can take to and I think about those differently than like a personality assessment, because they're a snapshot of how you are now. They're not a saying this is your personality now and forever, like a lot of personality assessments. Just a snapshot and help you gain awareness where you're at now, and then how you can shift that over time as you move through this process, right? And how you show up as a leader, how you're going to show up with the people that you're interacting with and whatnot. Second is to take that time through that personal introspection and having conversations with others to seek to get clarity of what's your intention and who you're trying to become. What are those things that are most important to you? Spend time in that, because you don't just want to be let your career happen to you and let your life happen to you, and then a few years down the road, you'll be like, what have I been doing? Just whatever others told me to do. And sometimes that works out okay, but you want to be more intentional and deliberate about that. So get that clarity so that you can use that intentionality as a filter for the decisions that you make. And then third is start then intentionally sharing your personal brand, both internally to your company and externally, to showcase those genius zones and those skills and those strengths that you have and the way that you deliver value, so that people can see you and find you. And sometimes then those opportunities might find you, but only because you've purposefully shared those things. So I find those things with people who are trying to make intentional career transitions. They work on the mindset, the clarity, and the personal brand. Those things provide a foundation for then all the real practical things you do to move through a career transition. But those three things are foundational, and where I love to work with building people in their capacity to move through that space with intention.
Yeah, to paraphrase Tony Robbins, he talks about allowing life to happen for you, not to you. And I guess that's what you're talking about in being intentional. You've, in the last couple of years, maybe 12 months, you've had a new son or baby, you've rebranded, you've released a book. What else is in the pipeline for Jeff?
Yeah, so I'm now looking ahead to like, what's the next book I'm going to write that'll be more related to teams and organizations, but still in kind of early phases and thinking about what's going to be the focus there. But in addition to the individual career and leadership coaching that I do, I'm really excited about leaning into even more work with teams and organizations to help them on this focus of building people, not things. And shifting some of that focus, because when we build people, a lot of things are going to go right. And we think about engagement, productivity, deeper levels of connection, retention, and all those things. And we can think about productivity as well. So many things can go well when we do that, and it's just not a huge focus when we think about people development in a lot of engineering and technical spaces. And I love facilitating conversations and helping open eyes for leaders and teams to see how can we move the needle here and see each other in a better way, so that we can build each other and support each other and increase the wonderful things we do together.
Sounds like an exciting future. Where can people go to follow or engage with you?
Yeah, so three things: jeff-perry.com, theintentionalengineer.com to go check out the book. There's also a free companion digital workbook that you can get if you get the book. And by the way, anyone who's not an engineer in the technology field. I've had dozens of people who have read the book and say, hey, this is applicable to all of us. So you don't need to be scared by the engineering title if that's not you. And the third place is find me on LinkedIn, very active there. If you search Jeff Perry, you should be able to find me.
Very nice, Jeff. Great catching up again. Hopefully it's not another 2 years before we touch base again. Thanks for being our guest on the ET project. It's been really enjoyable.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Wayne.
So what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button below and click on the bell icon so I can pop up in your feed occasionally with a great tip for your ultimate growth.